Good afternoon, and thank you all for being here today. I am joined by many people, but I will call out some of the names: our district attorney, Paul Howard, our police chief, Erica Shields, also Ms. Leach, and Brenda Muhammad from our victim witness program, and also Mr. Leach is here as well. And many others behind me who have played an important part in Atlanta's history. In 1979, I was 9 years old. I was the daughter of a single mother, working 2 jobs and back in school in the evenings. My story was the story of many children across this city. In the backdrop of that story is something that has stayed with me my entire life, and that was the era of Atlanta's missing and murdered children. And for those of us who grew up in that era, in so many ways it shaped our childhood, it robbed us of our innocence, and it reminded us all that evil was real. The difference with so many children across this city is that I stand here by the grace of God and was able to live to get to the other side of that story. I stand here as the 60th mayor of Atlanta, now the mother of 4 children, ages 8 through 16. Their ages are reflective of the children who were killed during my childhood. And I can't stand here today and not call their names. They were Edward Smith, age 14, Alfred Evans, age 13, Milton Harvey, age 14, Yusuf Bell, age 9, Angel Lanier, age 12, Jeffrey Mathis, age 10, Eric Middlebrooks, age 14, Chris Richardson, age 12, Latanya Wilson, age 7, Anthony Carter, age 9, Earl Terrell, age 10, Clifford Jones, 13, Darren Glass, 10, Charles Stevens, 12, Aaron Jackson, 9, Patrick Rogers, 16, Luby Jeter, 14, Terry Pugh, 15, Patrick Baltazar, 11, Curtis Walker, 15, Joseph Bell, 15, Timothy Hill, 13, William Barrett, 17. Adults: Eddie Duncan, 21, Larry Rogers, 20, Michael McIntosh, 23, Jimmy Ray Payne, 21, John Porter, 28, Nathaniel Carter, 27. A lot has changed in Atlanta since 1979. And a lot has changed in our world since 1981, when there was a conviction for 2 of these murders, the conviction of Wayne Williams. What has changed is that we now know that DNA technology is much more advanced. It did not exist in 1981. And even when we asked for retesting of evidence that was in our possession in the 1990s, we now know that there are national databases online that give us an opportunity to access even additional information as it relates to DNA. So just last week during my State of the City, I announced that the City of Atlanta would be looking to form some type of permanent memorial to honor these children and these victims. And this, in large part, was prompted by Mrs. Leach, who has spoken of not having a lasting memorial to honor her son. But also last week, I watched a national story that mentioned the arrest of a man charged with 2 rapes and murders based upon inputting his DNA or their DNA into a national database. I immediately reached out to Chief Shields to ask her what, if any, updated testing had we done as it relates to the missing and murdered children. Chief Shields then took the next step and spoke with our partners at the GBI, who agreed with Chief Shields that it would certainly be in order for us to now look once again at evidence that the City of Atlanta has in its possession, evidence that the GBI has in its possession, to once again take a fresh look at these cases and to determine once and for all if there's additional evidence that may be tested that may give some peace, to the extent that peace can be had in a situation like this, to the victims' families, to let them know that we have done all that we can do to make sure that their memories are not forgotten, and in the truest sense of the word, to let the world know that Black lives do matter. So with that, I will turn the podium over to Chief Erica Shields.
Thank you, Mayor. So from 1979 to 1981, there were 25 children, young Black males, that were murdered. And of these, 22 were attributed to Wayne Williams. And even though there is evidence tying Williams to these 22 children, he was only ever tried before a jury on the cases of 2 murdered adults. This has caused some of the victims' families to believe that they were never afforded justice, and as such, as the mayor spoke to, they have been unable to find peace. As law enforcement, we have an obligation to exhaust every conceivable avenue of investigation and make every effort to help these families find closure. In 1979 and 80, forensic science, fiber evidence collection, DNA collection, they were not utilized. This was not the norm. In fact, in May of 1980, APD Detective Bob Buffington was working the homicide of one of the victims, Eric Middlebrooks, age 14. Detective Buffington spotted trace fiber evidence on Middlebrook's shoe and collected it for further examination. This type of evidence collection had never occurred before. This was brand new for the Atlanta Police Department. And while some of his colleagues respected his attention to detail, there were many who made a mockery of his discovery. Detective Buffington, I'm pleased to say, is here with us today. His foresightedness helped propel the Atlanta Homicide Unit, which has been the backbone of our department for years. It is so talented, and I have complete faith in our folks. So Bob took this evidence to a microanalyst at the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, And fortunately, he met someone there, a young fellow by the name of Larry Peterson, who took interest in it. This piece of evidence became crucial in the trial against Wayne Williams. So let's fast forward 40 years to today and conceptualize all of the advancements that have been made in science since that first carpet fiber was found. We have an obligation to take those advancements and see if any further analysis can be conducted on the property and evidence that was collected 40 years ago. The families deserve to find closure. The Atlanta Police Department has reached out to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. And what we've asked, and that's our state laboratory, is that they look at the evidence that was handed over to them 40-some years ago, and they see whether any of it qualifies for further analysis, given the new advances in science. And what we are asking of them, that they report back to us what they have that could potentially be tested. And they've agreed to do this. Separately, there is evidence from the trial that the district attorney's office has, and he's very graciously offered to go through it and see if was there anything that was presented at trial that potentially is eligible for testing. And lastly, the Atlanta Police Department has numerous boxes of evidence from the trial. Now, much of it is documents and transcripts, but we already have begun the process of going through these boxes to see if there's anything that was never tested that would now be of value. We don't know what we'll find, but what we do know is we have an obligation. We have an obligation to these families to ensure that every imaginable investigative lead was followed. So with that, I will turn it over to District Attorney Paul Howard.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. First of all, I think I would like to commend the mayor and the chief of police because I can tell you from my experience, generally what we're seeing today with the police and the mayor stepping forward to ask that some reinvestigation is done in the case, I can tell you is not the norm. Generally, we are chasing people to ask that that be done. But the mayor and the police chief are stepping forward, and I think we ought to commend them for that. Let me just mention a couple of things. When the missing and murdered children's case started in 1979, it was tried in 1982. I had just started as an assistant DA with the Fulton County District Attorney's Office. It was a very tough time for our community. And after the conviction of the two cases, the district attorney at that time decided not to proceed with the other cases. Did not mean that they did not have enough evidence, but he made the decision, as I understand it, mainly because Wayne Williams had already received 2 life sentences. I can tell you that's always a tough decision. I had to, just on yesterday, make the same decision. We tried a defendant who was charged with 11 counts in an indictment, and one of those counts in the indictment was a rape charge, Ms. Mayor. And the jury convicted the defendant on 10 of the counts, but they were not able to reach a verdict on the 11th offense. And so we were asked by the judge today, were we going to retry the rape case? The defendant, however, received a sentence of 95 years to serve. And so we had to make the decision as to whether or not we would put the rape victim through the ordeal of having another trial, or whether or not we would be satisfied to accept the 95 years. And we decided today that we would accept the 95 years. It didn't mean that he was not guilty of rape. It meant that we made a decision that was in consideration of what we felt were some important interests. So the mayor is not aware of this, but in our office, we had already decided, we had planned to do it starting on May 1st. and we plan to start a conviction integrity unit in the DA's office, which would allow defendants, family members, and others interested in a case to make an application to the district attorney's office and ask the district attorney to review a case to determine whether or not the conviction was justified. It's not an appeals process, but it's very much like what we're facing with Wayne Williams. And so someone would simply ask that the evidence in the case would be reviewed. And so, Mr. Mayor, what I am going to do is to make this case the first case that we handle by our conviction integrity unit. Because what they will then do is to make a recommendation to the district attorney. We will share that recommendation with the mayor and to the public as well. But we know that as we stand, there are many heavy hearts that still exist in our community. I asked today that our victim witness advocates from the Fulton County DA's office, and I think that they're here, if you would, raise your hand, because I know that some of the family members are here today, Ms. Mohammed, and if there's someone that you need to talk to. But the other thing that we've decided to do is to set up a separate support group just for the victims in this case. So again, we want to work with you. We want to commend the police chief and the mayor because what we think has happened is a courageous act, but we think that it would be lost if we only applied it to one case. We ought to make it available for all of the people in our community. And again, Madam Mayor, I thank you.
Thank you, District Attorney Howard. And again, I want to reiterate what Chief Shields and District Attorney Paul Howard have shared. It may be that there is nothing else left to be tested, and it may be that we will not get any additional information. But I do think history will judge us by our actions, and we will be able to say that we tried. And with that, there are just a couple of other people I do want to recognize who are here. Michael Langford. Michael, if you can wave your hand. Michael led many of the community-based teams who went out and searched for the victims. And so, Michael, thank you for your continued care and concern for our communities. So I think Chief Shields has mentioned Detective Danny Haggard, Detective Bob Buffington, and also representing one of the families here today is Mrs. Leach. And Mrs. Leach, I understand that you will speak, if it is your preference.
I would like to say I want to thank everybody that's involved in what's going on. I want to thank y'all, and I really, really appreciate what you all have done and what you all are doing now. I am so happy to hear what I heard today, and I really appreciate it. And that brought a little comfort in my heart, because that I've been going through something for a long time. I've been going through this for a long time. I have been letting down for many years, and it's been almost 46 years, about 46 years, and I still haven't gotten no comfort or no closure or anything like that. But I just want to say I really appreciate what you're doing, and I want to thank the mayor for what she have done and what she is going to do for the community. I really appreciate that, and I really been down to want this plat for our children so that we could have somewhere to go and memorialize our children instead of putting up a poster board and go and memorialize them. We need something, because it seems like the Atlanta missing and murdered children have been forgotten in this city. They have been forgotten, and I don't know why, but they have been forgotten. Nobody has come for everybody that I went through, they turned me down. Mayor Franklin, she turned me down. And I don't think it's right for all these kids to be killed in this city and nobody was concerned about it. And I really, it hurt because we loved our children. And it really hurt. We want some closure. I want to know who killed Curtis. His case is still sitting on the shelf, getting dusty and rusty, and you can't see the page. I want some closure. I want some justice so that I can rest in peace. Because I haven't got that. Nobody came around and asked me anything about the Atlanta missing and murdered children. They've been forgotten and forsaken, and it's not right. We need this monument or this plaque for our children. I hear a lot of people going and immortalize their family members and their children and other members, but we don't have that here in Atlanta. I want it, and I want it now. And if anybody hear the sound of my voice, please help us, because I'm not going to stop. I'm going to keep it going. I'm not going to stop. Because you know why I'm not going to stop? Because I'm a warrior, and I'm a prayer warrior, and I'm not going to stop till I get it. So I want to thank you all again, the chief of police and all of y'all. I just want to thank y'all for what y'all doing for me. And the other parents, I speak on the behalf of the other parents. They may not be here, but I speak for them. So again, I want to say thank you all.
Thank you. I also just want to acknowledge and thank so many in the digital community, and also my friend Will Packer, who is doing a documentary on the missing and murdered children. I understand will be airing soon, and also to our local media, who has really kept this top of mind for so many of us. It's a very dark chapter in our city's history. And thank you, Mrs. Leach. And with that, I will open for any questions that you all may have.
Mayor, given how long DNA has been out there, I think a lot of our viewers would be surprised that someone hadn't thought about this before now.
Well, Morris, I really can't speak to that. But again, I think it's one of these things that because time has passed on, it just unfortunately, probably outside of the victims' families and people like Mrs. Leach, it just clearly has not been top of mind. But there's a saying, when you know better, you do better. And we as a city are doing better today.
Is there any belief with the folks here today that by re-examining this evidence that it may point to someone other than Wayne Williams at this point?
We don't know. And again, I want to stress there may not be any evidence available that can be re-examined. But we are taking the necessary step to formally say that we are going to open up every box and look in every corner and see what we have left and what we know. There may be something sitting off in a room somewhere that no one has thought to test before now. And as we've seen with so many of the cases nationally, sometimes it's about running them through public databases that can lead to arrest. So we will see what's available, and we'll find out what's there, and then I know that our district attorney will take the next steps accordingly.
Mayor, I know we're saying retesting evidence here, but is this officially reopening the case?
It is not what's considered officially reopening, but we are formally working with the GBI to make sure that retesting is begun, or testing of new evidence that perhaps has not been tested in the past.
What new evidence are you starting with?
We're starting with the evidence that we have that was collected from 40 years ago. Again, technology has changed tremendously. So it may be the testing of evidence that has already been tested, or it may be the testing of evidence that was not thought of to be necessary to have tested 20 years ago when we last retested. So this is, we are looking at every single thing that we have related to this case, and we'll provide that information and share with the GBI what we have, and they will pull out what they have and see if there are some additional matches that perhaps can be helpful.
Mayor, do you or the district attorney anticipate any possible further prosecutions if the evidence warrants?
I'll let our district attorney speak to that. I'm going to assume that it's premature to say that, and I think that our district attorney alluded to that as he shared about sometimes there are other decisions that have to be made or would be necessary to be made, but that will be done at the appropriate time.
Are there any specific cases that are going to be first? I think there's, 5 that were not tied to Wayne Williams. I guess there's 5 in DeKalb County.
Do you want to speak to that?
It's not the case
No.
that the mayor is talking about.
So, thank you. And I just want to acknowledge Lieutenant Danny Agan here. He was a key investigator along with Detective Buffington on the original investigation. And out of an abundance of just a courtesy, we spoke with him ahead of time, and he agreed that it's prudent to review. So I appreciate you being here, Lieutenant. Let me say this. We are not opening these files up by name. The question was asked, has this stuff not already been tested? I think the fact that I had to work to find where the evidence was is indicative that no one has gone through it exhaustively. We had to find out who was storing it. Was the DA, APD, GBI, FBI? That says that it's not. No one's done this recently. Now, some fibers, correct me if I'm wrong, were tested in 2006 or 7 that came back to animal hair that was tied to Wayne Williams. I believe that's the case. So there has been some efforts, but efforts to exhaustively go through all boxes and say, could this be looked at as evidence? That has not been done, and that's what we're doing. We're just painstakingly going to go through all of the boxes and see if there's anything there that A, either qualifies for retesting, so that would be what's already housed in the GBI, or B, just was never introduced for testing because the technology didn't exist at the time it was packaged up.
Chief, have you all asked DeKalb County Police to join you in this because they do have 5 cases, including Ms. Bell's son? We are going through the evidence and who stores the evidence. So we're just, at this point, we're not prosecuting a case. We're not going forward with a case. We're merely looking at the evidence that we possess.
But the short answer is if DeKalb County has additional evidence that may be helpful, then certainly we will partner with DeKalb County and whomever else may have evidence.
Chief, there's been high interest in this case. Why do you think it hasn't been re-examined before, the evidence, especially with the technological advances?
I think that to a degree that it has been, but I also think it hits on what was mentioned previously. It's been a footnote in Atlanta's history. And, I mean, when you start reading about it and you're seeing all of these little children killed in short amount of time, and it was just, it all feels like it was so routine. And so I commend the mayor for coming in and saying, you know what, this is a really ugly, dark chapter, but we need to own it. We need to own it, and we owe it to these families to make sure that we've done everything imaginable.
And I'll just personally share, since being elected mayor, this is something that has been top of mind for me. I've thought about it quite a bit. Just in terms of, I wonder if there's a conversation that someone would now have with me as mayor that perhaps they would not have had with me before that could shed some light, because I don't think it's any secret that for many people it's there have been questions as to whether or not Wayne Williams was responsible for all of the murders. And so I think this is something that's been lingering for quite some time. But I do think that having the attention that these cases has had nationally has been very helpful, because it's made me personally and all of us even think more about what, if anything else, can we do, and have we done all that we can do to make sure that we have the answers that are available.
Have you gotten any help? Are you looking at any help from federal authorities, FBI?
Right now, we have been talking with the GBI, but certainly as we go through this process, then we will reach out to all of the pertinent partners, including the FBI, DeKalb County, and anyone else who may have information. And hopefully, even by standing here today speaking about it, if there's another agency that has information that may be helpful, then we certainly hope that they will come forward.
How many murderers are we talking about? Because I always remember 29, but Chief, I think you said 25.
Well, it's so when you break it down, there's 25 African American young males. The bodies were found, and correct me if I'm wrong. There was one body who wasn't found. That's 26. There's 2 young females, and then there's the 2 adult males. So I guess what we're saying is, I think that goes back to the mayor's point, is there's a question of, was this the work of one person?
All right, if there are no other questions, we will conclude. Thank you all for being here today.
I think I talked to Larry Peterson today.